All right, let's deep dive into some Jeff Bezos stuff. Yeah, we got a whole stack of your sources here.
Yeah.
And it's not just about Amazon packages or rockets. It's more about how Bezos sees technology as a solution for, well, kind of for humanity's biggest challenges.
Yeah, it really is
Yeah.
fascinating how he connects these ideas that seem totally different at first, like from the role of a free press all the way to AI. But he always comes back to this question, how can we use tech to actually improve the human experience?
Totally. Yeah, he's not just like building companies or whatever. He's trying to build a better future, I think.
Yeah.
And he's not afraid to get all philosophical about it. So let's kick things off with his purchase of the Washington Post way back in 2013. Thought it was super interesting that they chose not to endorse, a presidential candidate in that last election. Really stirred things up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And his reasoning went way beyond just politics, I think. He wanted to make sure the Post stayed committed to unbiased reporting, especially because he owns both Amazon and the paper. He was definitely aware of that, those potential conflicts of interest.
Yeah. And he even said he might be like the worst owner because of those potential conflicts. But he argued that, like, being neutral builds more trust with readers.
Right, and that's where things get interesting. 250,000 people canceled their subscriptions after that decision. So was it like a stand for integrity, or did it actually hurt the public's trust?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Some people, like Marty Barron, the Post's old editor, he called it, let me get this right, cowardice with democracy as its casualty. Kind of harsh.
Yeah, a little bit. While others, like David Remnick from The New Yorker, he suggested it might have been to avoid conflict with, a certain candidate, someone known for their, let's just say, strained relationship with the media.
Yeah, some people definitely thought it was political. But Bezos insists it was all about the paper's credibility, especially in a world where, like, trust in the media is tanking. So was it an idealistic move that backfired or some long game to rebuild trust?
It's a debate that goes way beyond Bezos and the Washington Post. It raises questions about the media's role in a democracy and how tech is changing how we get news and whether neutrality is even possible anymore.
Woof, that's a lot to unpack.
Mhm.
So speaking of big picture stuff, let's switch gears to something totally different. Bezos and space travel.
Yeah, his first trip on Blue Origin's New Shepard wasn't just some joyride for a billionaire. He talked about how deeply seeing Earth from space affected him. You know what astronauts call the overview effect?
Right, and it seems like everyone who goes through that comes back changed. Jim Lovell, the Apollo 13 astronaut, said it perfectly. You don't go to heaven when you die, you go to heaven when you're born.
Oh, wow. Powerful. But William Shatner, who also flew on New Shepard, he actually had a kind of different reaction. He described the blackness of space as like this stark reminder of death. And that really emphasized how precious and fragile our planet is.
Huh. So two very different takes on the same experience, but both highlight how awe-inspiring space is and how it can change how we see life down here.
And Bezos sees space as more than just something to wonder at. He actually has this plan, kind of ambitious, even audacious, to relocate polluting industries off-planet to help save Earth's environment.
Hold on, seriously. Like moving factories to space, how is that even possible?
Well, it's a long-term thing. It relies on using the resources on the moon, kind of like a stepping stone to developing further in space. Think of it like the moon is a cosmic gas station. It provides the materials and energy we need to build out there.
That's some seriously long-term thinking. But is it realistic or just a billionaire's fantasy? Some people say we should focus on fixing Earth's problems now.
Right, and some, like Elon Musk, they're more into setting up colonies on Mars, like a backup plan if Earth goes kaput. But Bezos is convinced we can both protect our planet and go further into space. He sees it as a way to make sure humanity survives and thrives long term.
So, three totally different approaches to the future. And Bezos' vision with that whole space to protect Earth thing raises a ton of questions about the practical side, the ethical side, even the philosophical side, moving heavy industry off planet.
It definitely gets people talking. But let's bring things back down to earth for a sec and talk about Amazon, the company that launched Bezos into, well, everything.
Right, even though he stepped down as CEO a while ago, he's still super involved, especially with their AI push. He said he thinks AI will be as big as electricity was, like touching every part of our lives.
And Amazon's making some big moves in that direction. With their new Nova AI model, it's meant to compete with all the other big names in AI. So could Amazon, with all their resources and data, become the leader in this super fast-moving field?
It's a question that has a lot of people in Silicon Valley sweating. But besides the business stuff, Bezos is also really interested in the philosophical side of AI. Like, what does being human even mean? in a world where machines can do things we thought only humans could.
He's actually argued that finding meaning in life shouldn't be tied to, beating machines at their own game. He thinks real fulfillment comes from connecting with others, being creative, and contributing to something better than ourselves.
But isn't that going to get harder as AI gets better? Like, how do we even find our place in a future where the lines between humans and machines are so blurry?
That's a question that's going to keep getting more relevant as AI keeps getting more advanced. And it's one that Bezos, with his unique perspective on tech and humanity, seems to be struggling with too.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just AI, though. Like, we're already seeing tech change how we see ourselves, our relationships, and even how we understand the world.
And Bezos seems to really get that. Remember that idea about moving polluting industries to space? It's a pretty wild solution, but it shows how much he believes in tech to solve even the toughest problems.
Yeah, and he's not just looking for a Band-Aid either. He's put billions into the Bezos Earth Fund, supporting all these projects to fight climate change and protect nature. So for him, it's not one or the other. It's both space and fixing Earth. It's almost like he's hedging his bets, exploring every option for a future that works.
Maybe he realizes we need to do it all, innovate, conserve, be responsible stewards. And tech can help with all three.
He seems really driven by this idea of human progress, this belief that tech, if we use it right, can help us get past limits and reach a better future. But it makes you wonder, like, who gets to decide what progress even is and who benefits from all these advancements?
Those are important questions, yeah. Not everyone has the same access to tech, and there's worry that AI, for example, could make inequality even worse.
Right, so it's not just about the tech itself, it's making sure everyone can access it and that it's used ethically. Otherwise, we might end up with a future where only a few benefit and everyone else gets left behind.
Exactly, and that needs careful rules, public input, and a real commitment to fairness. It's not just a tech problem, it's a whole societal thing.
So leadership matters then. People like Bezos, with all their money and influence, they have to steer tech in a way that helps everyone, not just a select few.
Which brings us back to Amazon. Even though Bezos isn't CEO anymore, he's still super involved, especially with their AI stuff. He seems focused on using AI to make Amazon run better and ultimately make things better for customers.
That makes sense. I mean, Amazon has so much data, and they're experts in machine learning. They already use AI for, like, everything. Personalized recommendations, warehouse robots, Alexa, and with this new Nova model, they want to be a big deal in generative AI.
It'll be interesting to see how they stand out. The market's already pretty crowded, but one thing about Amazon is they're obsessed with customer satisfaction. Their whole business is about making things easy and convenient.
So it's not just about having the best AI. It's about knowing how to use it to solve real problems and actually make people's lives better.
And that's where Bezos' vision is really cool. He's not just geeking out over what AI can do. He's thinking about how it can improve lives in concrete ways. He's talked about how AI could personalize education, make healthcare easier to get, even tackle problems with aging.
That's a far cry from those sci-fi stories
Yeah.
where AI takes over and becomes the bad guy.
Right. It's a more hopeful view of the future, one where tech empowers people and creates a world that's fairer and sustainable. But we have to remember, tech is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
It comes down to us then. We have to choose how we develop and use these powerful technologies. We have to make sure they're used ethically and responsibly, and that everyone benefits.
And that needs constant discussion, public involvement, and holding those in power accountable.
Speaking of power, we've been talking a lot about Bezos' work life. But what about the guy himself? He's super private. But what do we know about his personality and values?
Well, he's known for working really hard and making decisions based on data. But he's also surprisingly open to trying new things and even failing. He thinks innovation needs risk-taking and learning from mistakes. He said Amazon's success came from tons of experiments, a lot of which totally flopped.
It's kind of surprising, right? You'd think someone like him would be all about avoiding risk and staying in control. But he seems to embrace that messy trial and error part of innovating.
And he applies that to his personal life, too. He's big on constantly learning, always looking for new knowledge and experiences. And he's a total adventurer, whether it's exploring the ocean or blasting off into space.
You can tell he's curious and loves adventure. It's like he's always pushing himself beyond his comfort zone.
And he's not afraid to think big, either. He's got this quote: "What we need to do is always lean into the future. When the world changes around you and when it changes against you, what used to be tailwind is now headwind, you have to lean into that and figure out what to do because complaining isn't a strategy."
That's powerful stuff. It's about accepting change, adapting, and finding opportunities even when things are tough.
And it shows a certain optimism, a belief that we can shape our own future, even when the world feels like it's changing too fast.
But it also means being willing to step outside our comfort zones, challenge what we think we know, and embrace the unknown.
And that can be scary, but it's also where the most exciting things happen.
So where does all this leave us in our deep dive into Jeff Bezos? We've looked at his vision for the future, his problem-solving style, even his philosophy. What stands out to you?
I think the biggest thing is to remember that Bezos, even with all his wealth and power, is still human. He has the same desires, fears, and hopes as all of us. He wants to make a difference, leave a mark, be remembered for more than just money.
And we can all relate to that, right?
Uh,
Wanting our lives to have meaning and purpose, to do something good for the world.
Exactly, and Bezos' story, even with all its twists and turns, is really a story about what humans can do. It reminds us that we can shape our own destinies, push the limits of what's possible, and create a better future for everyone.
It's inspiring, but it also makes you feel the responsibility.
Yeah.
Because the future isn't set in stone. It's being made right now by the choices we make, the actions we take, the values we hold.
And that's a challenge we all face, together.
It really is.
Yeah.
But before we finish up, there's one more thing about Bezos that I found really interesting. It's about how he handled his pay at Amazon. Like, he decided not to take a huge salary or stock options, even when the company's value was going through the roof.
Yeah, that's right. He apparently only took a small salary for years, something like $80,000, and he didn't take any extra stock options, even though the shares he already had made him one of the richest people in the world.
That's pretty wild for a CEO. Most of them are all about getting as much money as they can.
Mhm.
What was his thinking there?
He felt like as the founder and a major shareholder, he already had plenty of motivation. He said taking more would have felt icky. His goal was to build a successful company, not just make himself richer.
So as a matter of principle, then he believed that his wealth should come from how well Amazon did not, from some crazy compensation package.
Yeah, and he even suggested a different kind of rich list, one that ranks people based on how much wealth they've created for other people. He thinks that's a much better way to measure success.
That's a radical idea,
Mhm.
but it makes you think, what if we stopped focusing so much on individual gain and thought more about collective impact? What if success wasn't about how much money you have, but how much value you bring to the world?
It's a really interesting concept, and it fits with Bezos' idea that business can be a force for good. He's not just interested in building companies, he wants to solve problems and make a positive difference.
And that brings us back to how technology can be used to improve people's lives, whether it's through e-commerce or cloud computing or space exploration or AI. Bezos seems to be driven by this idea of using innovation to make things better, more efficient, more accessible.
He's not blind to the potential downsides of technology, but he's ultimately optimistic about its ability to solve humanity's biggest problems. He sees technology as a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
So it all comes down to human choices. We have the power to shape how technology evolves and to guide it in a direction that benefits everyone.
Absolutely. And that takes vigilance, critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge those who might use technology for their own selfish purposes at the expense of others. It's a responsibility we all share, whether we're tech innovators, policymakers, or just everyday people.
So much to think about as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Jeff Bezos. What are the main takeaways for you? What will you be pondering even after we're done talking?
For me, it's the reminder that even the most powerful people are still human. They're driven by a mix of things, motivations, values, and aspirations, and they're capable of both great and terrible things. Ultimately, it's up to us as a society to hold them accountable and make sure their actions reflect our shared values.
Well said. And I think it's also a reminder that technology isn't neutral. It reflects the values of the people who create it and the societies where it's used. So we have to be aware of those values and have open discussions about the ethics of new technologies and work together to create a future where technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Exactly. And on that note, maybe it's time to open up the conversation to our listeners. What stood out to you in this deep dive? What questions are you still grappling with? What are your hopes and fears about the future of technology and how it will affect humanity? These are the kinds of questions we should all be asking ourselves as we navigate this rapidly changing world.